right. Well, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. So thanks for joining us today. We know your time is valuable and we appreciate you all for being here. I'm Sarah Sears, founder and principal at S Design, a brand strategy and creative innovation firm. And for the last 30 years, I've helped leaders navigate moments of transition through brand, culture, identity, and communication strategy. We work with the organization in the midst of big change, whether that's mergers and acquisitions, where you're figuring out how to align cultures, or brand architecture, or growth moments that call for modernization or repositioning, or even succession planning, where founders want to prepare their company for sale and build brand equity that increases value and attracts buyers. I care about people, and I believe that real lasting change starts with alignment around purpose, vision, and values. When that happens, organizations don't just function better, they become places where people feel connected, inspired, and proud of the work they're doing. So today we're going to explore how to lead through uncertainty with clarity, confidence, and care. And before we dive in, I just want to thank my team. I want to thank Catherine and I want to thank Olivia for being here to help me today. And Kathleen could not be here. She had a family emergency, but I know she really wanted to be, and she sends everyone her best wishes. I'm going to share some of her stories, and we've been working really closely together. So I'm sorry she's not here, but we're going to go ahead and move on. Okay, so this is a working session, not just a webinar. So we invite you to participate to get the most out of it in real time. And I've got a lot to fit in, so please add your comments and questions in the chat, and we'll answer as time allows. And we've saved some time for Q&A at the end. We're going to start with some background and context, and then we'll dig into the workshop. So, and then after our workshop today, I'm going to send you an email and I'll recap with some tools. And at the end of this, we'll take a photo of everyone who is here today so we can share it after. So this workshop focuses on centering the process around people and moving forward with clarity and understanding. So we're not diving into frameworks or KPIs or detailed project plans today. Instead, we're going to be shining a light on empathy and the lived experience of change and the essential human side of transformation. We're going to zoom in on what it really takes to lead change well, not just to manage it, but to move through it in a way that builds alignment, resilience, and trust. Because here's what we know. Anytime there's change, brand and trust are on the line. And that brings us to why this matters so much. Because here's the reality. About 70% of change initiatives fail. And studies repeatedly show that it's not because of flawed tech or bad strategy, it's the people issues, lack of engagement, unclear communication, resistance, and weak leadership sponsorship. So if we don't prioritize people, the whole effort can unravel. And here's what the research shows in these different areas. So in mergers and acquisitions, the failure rate is 70 to 75%. And the leading causes of failure are poor integration, culture clash, overestimated synergies, and rushed deals. On the business side, business transformation, the failure rate is 70 to 88%. And the lack of focus on talent, tech-only focus, or ineffective communication are often the reason. And when you get into digital transformation, the failure rate is 70 to 84%. This is because of tech-led approaches, misaligned strategy, and poor design or structure. Change is inevitable, and today we have even more complexity and often risks associated with perception, and people are overlooked. When leadership is focused on mergers or a digital transformation, and the change puts a lot of pressure on people, and sometimes it leads to growth and opportunity, but it can also backfire. I know firsthand of technology changes that have put people in the hospital because of stress. So we want to do our best to figure out how to make this a better process for everyone. Okay, so what change are you dealing with right now? And I'm going to call on someone. I'm going to pick Shannon. Shannon, what kind of change are you dealing with right now?
Um, so, Hi everyone. I'm with I2E and Plains Ventures. We help companies or small entrepreneurs and founders launch and grow their business. That's kind of on our nonprofit side. And then on our for-profit, our Plains Ventures side, we provide the capital that's needed for those companies to scale. So right now, recently, um, we've had quite a bit of change. Our president retired at the end of our fiscal year, which was June 30. So now we have a new president. Um, we've moved offices. Our team is spread out between Oklahoma City and Tulsa. And then I just stepped into a new role as a VP of Communications and Marketing. And so there's just been a lot of, positive and exciting change. But again, it's still change and, all the things that are to come.
Change is hard. Yeah. Okay,
Yep.
so you've got a leadership change. You've
hmm
got you're moving people around, so you've got some systems probably changing as well.
hmm
Um, Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. I'm sure we're all kind of thinking about how this applies to us. Let's talk about alignment, right? Because when you're all that stuff is shifting around, that's really kind of the one thing that we want to think about. So change without alignment leads to a breakdown of trust, culture, and brand. So when organizations grow, merge, restructure, they often focus on operational logistics and external messaging. But what gets missed often invisibly is the human layer. So how are people feeling that change? And how aligned is the internal culture with the public brand, and whether those things still reflect the purpose and strategy that are supposed to guide them. So, when you're thinking about the change that you're going through, if the pieces don't align, if these pieces don't align internally, you're going to have employees that become disengaged, customers can grow skeptical, and leaders can lose credibility. And the organization can start to drift away from clarity and away from keeping people in the process and away from trust. So today we're going to look at some invisible risks before they show up in performance and perception or turnover. And we're going to look at ways to spot moments of misalignment. We're going to look at practical tools like journey mapping to plan and communicate and lead more intentionally. And perhaps most importantly, to lead change in a way that feels human and consistent and worth following. So trust can seem like a soft outcome, but it's really a strategic advantage. And misalignment between brand culture and trust can quietly erode value, morale, and reputation, especially during times of change. When you think about, and Shannon, I'm just going to stick with you for a second because we've got that kind of keyed up. When you think about when you think about the change that's going on, are there certain areas of misalignment that kind of bubble up for you that you have a concern about, where things may not be quite where you want them to be?
I don't know if it's necessarily misalignment. I think now, with the new leadership, figuring out what that new vision is and then implementing that and getting buy-in from everyone on the team. And then kind of going back to, the messaging and that branding, making sure that everyone is conveying that new direction.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a good plan in place.
It's in progress.
Yeah. But you're
We're
working from the inside out, which I think
mhm.
is really important. So,
Yeah, we're also trying to, again, we're a very small team, and so we're looking at ways to implement AI and see what features we currently have, do some training, so we can be more efficient, with
okay.
our workflows and process. So again, I think that's kind of another change that's happening,
Yes.
because everyone has different comfort levels of where they're at.
Okay. And you can use when we start getting into the tools, you can use them for these different things. So,
Okay.
um, I'm going to give you guys some worksheets. And so you can download all of them, but I think there's one that I think is going to be better for digital transformation. which you can also use for the AI. Let's talk about brand and culture misalignment. When what you say externally doesn't match what people are experiencing internally, is when you have brand and culture misalignment. So employees feel like they're living in a different company than what's marketed, or customers sense a disconnect and the messaging feels hollow or performative. And sometimes recruiting and retention suffer. Like the example I like to use is, that's not the company I thought I was joining. When you interview someone and you know what you're saying is different than the experience that they will have, but you can't really control it. Leadership credibility declines, especially if promises aren't lived out. And word of mouth can turn negative if people trust each other more than they trust what they see you putting out, right? If it's not consistent. Culture and trust are misaligned when values or behaviors on paper don't match the lived experience. Psychological safety can erode, and people stop sharing ideas or giving feedback because you don't feel safe sharing that information. Resistance to change increases, especially in M&A or digital shifts. Middle managers can burn out from navigating mixed signals, and trust in leadership plummets, even if intentions are good. So sometimes you can see quiet quitting or disengagement, or active dissent can rise. So you can experience retention issues, and best team members can go first, which is not what you want. So when we see brand and trust misalignment, when external perception of the brand doesn't match how people feel they're being treated, or what the company actually does. So brand reputation can deteriorate from broken promises, or customers can feel baited and switched. Like, you said you were this, but now I feel like you're something different. Crisis moments can escalate faster because there's no built-up reservoir of trust, and earned media or social proof becomes negative or disappears. Advocacy can shrink, and people won't refer or defend or rally behind the brand as much as they used to. So when brand culture and trust aren't aligned, it creates internal friction, external confusion, strategic drag where people are just resisting moving things forward, reputation risk, talent loss, customer churn, and an overall loss of credibility and momentum. So Kathleen shared an example, and she said I could share it, but she said that she remembers sitting in an interview panel when they were undergoing a big change and interviewing a new project manager. And the company she said she worked for at the time was grossly understructured. And in the interview, she heard the executive on the panel telling the potential employee that they had a very disciplined and industry standard project management department. And she knew that they had the opposite. And she remembered feeling really uncomfortable, and that she was part of a charade. And she said that, and I just think that's a great example of living into your brand and practicing what you preach. I was going to ask if anybody else, now that we've kind of talked about some of these trust and misalignment issues, does anyone else have an example? Sue, have you seen an example of when trust or brand are misaligned and how that affects a project?
Yeah, we've seen it in some of our clients where upper management is just not coordinating and communicating correctly with the employee base. And eventually it does fall apart. They put up with it for a little while, but when raises don't come when they're promised, or reviews, or some more often though, I'll have to say, when the company doesn't move in the direction that they promised, so that the employee can grow with it, or the interest level in that next phase that they had kind of wanes if the company doesn't take the proper steps to go forward.
Right, because you really want to bring everyone with you. Yeah. And so it just becomes a disconnect, and it's really hard to recover from that kind of thing. Thank you, Sue. Brand is what people believe about you, and culture is how your team experiences that belief. And when trust is built when those things align. So I want to define brand just a little bit because I think people have different understandings for brand. Some people think it's your logo or marketing, but it's really about perception. Okay, so the purpose is the foundation and the shared belief that drives value and informs vision and anchors everything into your organization, everything that your organization says and does. And then strategy connects how the organization plans to act on purpose, translating beliefs into goals and structures and decisions. And brand is no longer seen as solely external. It's reflective of the perceptions of both internal stakeholders, so your employees, managers, and shareholders, and external stakeholders, so customers, vendors, partners, and even the broader community. And culture includes the behaviors and values that are lived inside the organization and expressed outside of it by advocates, fans, and loyal customers who embody the brand. Trust sits at the top and is earned when brand perception and culture experience align consistently with strategy and purpose. So when things go well in M&A system rollouts and when they tend to break down. So I'm using M&A as an example here, but you can apply this to a rebrand, you could apply this to digital transformation, but things go well when everyone feels like they're part of the transition. So if you have a plan of when you're going to start including different parts of the organization and you do that intentionally, the culture dictates the responsibility of successful planning, and execution is shared by all team members. So people feel like they have a role in it and they know what their role is and they're able to do it together. Then the culture drives transparent and clear communication, even when news is bad, because we know that sometimes when there's a big transformation, not everything is going to go the way we expected. And if you've ever worked with a great project manager and they're just able to say, you know what, we're going to need to do something different here. And everybody is able to move through that in a way that's transparent and recalibrate. System rollouts tend to break down when leadership is not aligned on purpose and culture, or the team doesn't effectively identify the impact to the people and culture at the beginning, and team members don't have a Northern Star on which they can base their decisions, right? Because you want people to have some autonomy and be able to roll into the plan with their own perspectives. So decisions are delayed or not made and default to the easiest or quickest. So sometimes people just start moving ahead with things and it's not part of the plan. And that's when things can really go awry, right? I'm going to share a couple of case studies that Kathleen shared with me. Kathleen's background is IT, and she's been very involved in some really big mergers and acquisitions. So one example that she had, well, she said that there was a heartbreaking acquisition. It was heartbreaking for our executive team and shareholders, where the acquisition was meant to gain both assets and a big boost to their workforce of younger employees because their employee population was aging. And so the company acquired a brand of high performance, hardworking, fast moving, cream of the crop young employees, and the profits reflected that. The acquiring company had a legacy brand and a culture of being steady, but a bit slow with limited profits. So rather than trying to shape a new brand and culture prior to the acquisition, they tried to merge the acquired company's workforce into their legacy brand and culture. And the average age differences between the two workforces were very different. So one was like 55 average age, and the other one was much younger. And the technology was different. And so there was going to have to be, changing the way people worked one way or another. And the associated cultural differences led to a ton of internal friction, resulting in, most of that young talent force leaving. When I think about a case study like that, if there had been a little bit more intention about the culture fit up front, there's lots of ways that you could address that, right? through brand architecture, you may have decided to keep the brands separate, but figure out how to connect the two and how they would work together to preserve that. Or, I think, and Kathleen and I talked a lot about this a lot, even just some more planning around it to not have it be an elephant in the room and to really meet it head on and say, we know we're merging these two cultures. We're very different, and put activities in place to redefine what that culture was going to be like, merging those two things together. So again, there's lots of different ways you can approach things like that, but it requires planning, and it requires really looking at the culture and what you want to retain in terms of the brand and what you want to merge into something else. So another example, which was a very happy example she told me about, was after several acquisitions, a company found itself with 4 different sub-departments. They should have been a single department, but they were separate because they each used a different configuration of the software. And again, she was doing a lot of IT software configuration and things like that. So they all thought they had the best configuration and that their business processes were the best. And over the course of about 8 weeks, she said they met regularly, and they got to really know each other. And they also got to really define the purpose of why they were integrating everything and figure out the strategy for it and culture as a team. And because of that, everyone felt like they could speak their mind. They really got to understand what everyone's strengths were and how they were different. And even though she said they had some very intense conversations around it, they were able to work through it as a team, and everybody could speak their mind, and they were very respectful of each other. She said there was a lot of passion going on, but anyway, it formed a really strong trust with them, and they became a really great team after that, because they were being very honest and transparent with each other. And anyway, she said everybody was a little competitive, but they ended up being able to joke about it and be resources for each other in the future. And it just made a big difference. I want to talk a little bit about, I had a client that had they were a sock manufacturer, and this is probably more of a rebrand, right? So they were known for the licenses for their white label products, but they did not have their own identity. And I noticed in this project, it was really important that we include everyone in the organization. We also worked with their strategic plan to make sure that everything aligned. But by including, all of their employees, even down to the people that loaded the boxes on the trucks and everything, we were able to really build up their brand from the inside out and really learn how to weave their culture into into all the messaging and everything, and align it with their strategic plan. So what they ended up with was a brand that really communicated what their difference was in the world, and it resonated with the values of the employees and the leadership. And so when they were going through then and, kind of retooling everything to meet with that brand, they had buy-in from the top down. It was very successful. And that organization went from 15 million in sales a month to 90 million in sales a month, and ended up acquiring several different other brands. But I went back and interviewed him after he'd sold the company, and he said that alignment was the catalyst for all of that growth. So, which I thought was fantastic. Now, in the public sector work that I do, we do a lot with digital transformation. And so more around technology, but we use this journey mapping a lot. And we're looking at not just the touch points of the existing technology and where kind of all the friction points are, but we're really looking at the individual people and their role and how they feel about it. We're documenting those feelings alongside the different parts of technology alongside the processes that they have so that we can improve those experiences. And one of the things that I don't know that everybody talks about that often is that, and Catherine and I talked about this earlier this week, but when you're talking about building value in a business and you're going through a big transformation, and right now, I think, people want to grow, but right now there's just a lot of stuff going on in the world that makes that difficult, right? But if you really focus on what we call willingness to pay, right? The amount that someone will pay for a product, that value goes up when your brand perception, the value of your brand goes up. That is usually defined by people are willing to pay more because they're having a better experience with the company. So if you can start to identify what these experiences are inside your company and outside of your company on a journey, then you can start to raise that WTP, the willingness to pay, and you can also start to increase the value for the employees and the partners of their willingness to stay, right? So you're building in stickiness for them, you're lessening your churn, and you can do that by improving experiences. So I'm going to drop some journey map templates in here, and this is when we're going to start to workshop. So, okay, I'm going to drop 3 different documents in here. So we've got a document in here for mergers and acquisitions. So that would be if you were going to sell your business to someone else, or if you're a company who's going to be merging several organizations together and creating a new company, that would be the template that you'd want. We also have one for a rebrand, which is if you're reimagining how your organization shows up in the world, that would be the one for you. And then there's another one that's for digital transformation. They're all basically the same, but oh, that's good, Olivia. Yeah, so you can see what I want you to do is that you're going to start thinking about who is involved in this process. And this is human-centered design, right? So this is where in the real world, I've made these journeys for you. In the real world, you could plot out the actual journey, like what are the steps that people are going to take. But I've just kind of done a journey for you so that we have some structure around this, okay? Because we don't have a ton of time. So the exercise is to pick a person. It can be any person on this journey, and you're going to imagine what their experience is as they go through these steps. So the first step on this M&A one is pre-work and discovery. The second step is announcement. The third step is rollout begins. So as you're thinking about this, you can see something's happening behind the scenes. Should I be worried? Right? Like I may be a little suspicious. Maybe I feel left out. Somebody said something to me in front of the water cooler, and now I'm, kind of starting to worry about it. Or someone sent me a text and said, did you hear, that this is happening? I'm going to be thinking about what does this mean for me, right? Maybe when the announcement comes out, I'm thinking, am I still going to have a job? I might be anxious, destabilized, protective. I might be talking to my peers. I might be updating my resume. When the rollout begins, now granted, there could be an example where this is done really well, but often we see, no one is giving me answers. I haven't been communicated with. This feels rushed. I'm a little bit confused or overextended because now I have new stuff to do on top of my old stuff. And I don't really know how does this change the way I do my job or the way I talk to people, or does it or doesn't it? I don't know. Maybe they're mid-transition, they're still figuring it out. I might start to feel fatigued or weary about things, and then go live. Well, we're in it now. I'm just trying to keep up. And now I have to a lot more work to do because I got to do what I was doing before and transition to this new thing. And then in this stabilization reflection period, I've adapted. This is the new normal. Am I happy here? Is that thought of what it would be? So a lot of this experience too, we're just going to start with going through the journey and thinking about what that means for the people that are going through the change. And after you guys are done with this, then we'll talk a little bit about how you can use that to make that change better. But right now, you're just going to be thinking about what do I think is a realistic assumption of what people are feeling at this time. And I would say if we were doing this, if this was a real project, we would be interviewing people. So it's okay to make assumptions because we all do that anyway. So just get them written down. But if you were doing this in real life, you would be interviewing these specific people and asking them, how do you feel? How does this make you feel? Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys a few minutes here. I'm gonna give you guys 12 minutes. So you can print out the journey map that feels good to you. And if you want to, you can go ahead and turn off your cameras, and I can turn off my camera. I don't want you guys to feel like I'm staring at you. So, and just take some time to really think about the process that you're navigating right now. And we'll circle back in a few minutes. Okay, so how was that for everyone?
Sarah, I can volunteer. I did the
Okay.
exercise for myself.
Oh, you
So,
did? Oh, good.
yeah. So I picked the rebranding, and the reason I picked that sheet is because I have some different groups that I run around Houston, and some are online. And one of them, I'm wanting to restructure the leadership team and how we facilitate the meeting and how and I want to hire someone to help me to oversee it. And so that exercise of just thinking through all the players and what that might be like for them, like I realized as I was partway through the worksheet, I thought this is a very basic, and I mean that in a helpful way, not like in an insulting way. It's a very foundational step-by-step project plan of the considerations of all of the parties so that I think about how this experience will feel for them and how to position it accordingly. And I think I really would have just thought about a lot of the logistics of it, but not so much coming from that position of empathy. And so I was about halfway through filling out the sheet and I thought, I really need to use this. This is actually very helpful. So I feel like
Fantastic.
it gave me what would have been like a logistic project plan, and it made me think of a people response project plan and how that would affect the brand. So that's really cool.
Yeah. And so I think too, and when you're thinking about that, you can go back through that and, just kind of think of like, what are the touch points that are also part of that journey? Because we didn't really do a true journey map. A true journey map would be following that one person through that entire experience, right?
Mm.
So and in this one, we just took the process and plugged everyone into it. So, but if you were to follow someone's journey, then you would think, oh, they're going to, and you do this really well anyway, Catherine, because, with your emails and things like that, you're always used to looking at touch points, but it's just that extra aspiration, right? That extra little thing. And again, you already do this really well, but when we look at it from those people's perspective, because sometimes people are different than us too, right? And we
Totally.
know,
Well, yeah, in this case, I would say they actually really are like the persona of just the way they think, the type of industry focus they are different. And so I think I might think of the steps from a logistics standpoint, but to anticipate how would I want this to be received? Can you tell my intention? Get some feedback, get an inside coach,
right?
gives me some feedback like that. Those are things I might not have thought of.
And I think too, like if you think of like a project manager versus an account executive, right? Like very different people. They want their information differently, right? Like if
Mhm.
I'm a project manager, I do not want you to call me. I want you to look at the software and figure it out. Do not ever call me. I never want to talk to you. If I never saw you, I'd be happy as a clam, right? But if I'm the account exec, I'm going to want to talk to you about it. I'm going to want to I'm going to want to work through it with you. Like, I'm going to have a totally different way of being in the world. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes those things do kind of, if we think of engineers or technology oriented people, they're just typically a different set of skill sets that lead themselves to align with different personalities. But again, that's why it's really important to go back and talk to actual people, because then you can get a lot of this behavioral nuances, and just like the way I think about things. So does anyone else want to talk about what they explored in their journey? I'm going to call on Caitlin.
I could feel it. Uh, so I'm with Quick Print, and I think, Sarah, you know that we've had a lot of internal changes. And so I was kind of mapping out, like, from the time that I took over this store to now. And so part of it I took from like the employee and the customer perspectives. I did both of them because I thought it was really important to show the progress on both. So on the employee, with the initial change, there was a lot of confusion, but there was cooperation and they were concerned, frustrated, definitely anxious about the unknown. But then, once we got the announcement in that we had somebody to take over and everything was going to be fixed and we were going to get it right, they were able to become more engaged. And they were stressed but optimistic. And then, of course, there was frustration as standards were re-implemented. But then that brings us to the reworking, where there was concern over training and learning speed from, the employees thinking they weren't keeping up and they were fearful of customers. There was a little resistance to coaching. But then mid transition, we saw like a big 180 where all of a sudden our confidence returned. My people were starting to show pride in their growth and where they've come from, because it's not an easy task to do everything all the time at a print
Yeah.
shop. And then, embracing standard practices. So then 6 months out, they're owning all practices. There's minimal frustration, and the pride in their work is still there. And then now we're kind of in the stabilization reflection, which is where trust in the customers return, and then the trust from the customers in us also returns. So
when you think about that journey, that was really good, by the way, very detailed.
thank you.
If you think about that journey now, do you think if you had thought through this whole process, or if you did this exercise, would you think if you were going to go through another change, are there things that you would do differently?
I think there would have been some things that I did a little bit differently, because before I went and tried to rehaul 23rd Street, I actually was sent up to Stillwater to do something similar. But I think a lot of it was me trying to copy what I did with Cowboy Copy. And I would have, if I had this map, I probably would have approached 23rd Street a little bit differently. The culture in Oklahoma City and the customers and the employees is totally different than it is in Stillwater. So, I think this definitely would have helped me maybe not get off on little side tangents as much as I probably did. So,
Yeah. I think sometimes it can really help us to think about how to get in front of things with our planning, and I think when sometimes I think of the analogy of when you get a goldfish at the store, you leave him in the water and then you stick him in the water in the bag for a while. You let him acclimate. So I always kind of think of like, how can you start acclimating people to a process? Or like you said, there was some resistance at specific points, like if they had maybe been engaged in a way where they didn't have to do anything yet, but maybe they were involved in the creative process of like, if I had training, what kind of training would I like? Like, what would be good for me? Then they're a part of it. And so then when it comes time to implement, they're part of the plan, so sometimes it helps to kind of get people acclimated a little faster. So do you have any questions about anything that you want to ask me? She's like, no. That was really insightful. Okay. All right. Does anyone else have anything that they want to add to the process?
Sarah, I'll share a story.
Yeah.
Over the years, we've been in business 42 years, and so we've done a lot of crazy stuff over the years. But several times we have absorbed other companies, and the big concern with doing that is sometimes you have customers jump ship just because something changed.
Right.
So making that seamless as you bring a whole new customer set in and merge them with yours, it has been a challenge sometimes. And we know that we're going to have some attrition there. It doesn't matter what we do, we're going to have some attrition there just because. So the last time was 2004 when we actually absorbed the Works company and took all of their clients, all of their hosting, all of their web development, and we were pretty accurate with who we were going to lose and who was going to, stick with us, whether they knew us or not. And so those are difficult things to mitigate sometimes.
They are. And sometimes it just comes down to culture because people kind of don't know how they're going to fit with a new organization or with if they see someone in a role that's similar to theirs, they may make assumptions of like what's going to happen to my role, things like that. Was there anything that you did to kind of mitigate that risk? Like what were your thoughts around preparing for that? I'm curious.
Well, we didn't have any problem with the programmers we brought in. They all understood right up front what their role was. But one of the problems the old Works company had and why they did what they did was they couldn't keep their servers up. And so that was something that we could assure clients who stayed with us they would not be experiencing anymore, was their website being down. So we tried to communicate well with them what the upside of the new acquisition was and what they would be experiencing.
That's great. So that's great. So how did you do the worksheet?
Did I?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually I did the rebrand.
Okay.
I got almost through it. But that's more what we're experiencing today.
Yeah. So, and
did
you like the process? Is there anything that that was helpful about it to you?
Yes, because we're doing a lot of this today. We're transitioning. And in fact, I had an employee, one of the things that's happening under my roof is we're transitioning so much to AI.
Right.
And giving every one of our clients a platform where they can see everything they're doing with us, a dashboard, if you will. And one of my employees said, well, do I need to look for a new job if you're implementing this much AI?
Oh,
And so,
yeah.
when an employee asks you that, then you have to reassure them that they'll have a place here, that, their role may change a little bit, but it's not going to be eliminated and things like that.
Yeah, that's a great, I feel like stakeholder interviews, I mean, like employee interviews and things like that are so great for that kind of just to see what everyone's thinking. And it just builds it, especially if you're doing it on a regular basis, because then you're really building trust with those people. Especially, and then if you can tell them this is what I can do now and this is what I can't, so you're kind of being real transparent about that. But that can give you a lot of clues. I think that digital transformation process, and of course you're in tech, so you get it, but people don't realize sometimes, of course, you're going to plan out all of the, you're going to map out all of your processes in order to figure out where to use your AI. But adding the people portion to that is a really interesting addition because then you can really see things up front that could be a hiccup. Okay. Well, thank you, Sue, for sharing. Susan, do you have anything to add? I'm interested to see if you use this kind of a tool with your clients.
I have not, which is partly why I'm here.
Oh, good.
So I'm looking at this and saying, oh, this is a really great way to for some of our clients who are in maybe a transition. So basically what I did during the exercise is I didn't do for business, but I said, well, we're thinking about some things personally. I'm just going to do that. You can use
Yeah,
this even on a personal decision making level as well.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that's how I used it today.
Oh, great. Yeah, I have there is one of my favorite designers. She has written a book about how to design your life. And she's done a ton of research with it's called Design the Life You Love. And she's done a ton of research with the elderly and systems and things like that. And she's actually uh, done a new book called Design the Long Life You Love. And it's about friendships and just how we can
Hmm.
design a life around that. And she's like an incredible designer, industrial designer. So anyway, so yes, you can definitely use it in all different ways. So everyone's a designer, you know, really. Okay. All right. Well, does anybody have any questions about the process or about how it would work for different things based on your situation? Catherine, do you have any more questions?
The other thing I think that would be cool to capture, Sarah, is that Sue referenced a merger and acquisition
Yeah.
example. And I was thinking of like one of the things that's tricky about stakeholder interviews in my mind there is that sometimes you think you're mapping for the culture to merge with another. I'm saying this from a personal experience.
Yeah,
When the
yeah.
only time I've done an acquisition, I bought a company. Like sometimes you're just not even quite buying what you think you're buying. Like you do your best to do the diligence,
Mhm.
but like what their brand perception is not even like once you like 'cause we did a survey after and said, what programming have you enjoyed that you want us to continue, things like that. And it just took me a while to realize that I didn't actually buy what I thought I'd bought. So I was looking at the
Mhm.
sheet and thinking, how would you, in a diligence process, do that a little bit differently? I probably would still make the purchase, but I would definitely have handled the rollout differently in hindsight. And so that one feels more complicated to me.
Yeah, and I think part of it is, when and I'm just gonna kind of, just roll with this a little bit, but everyone has an idea of what their brand is, but really the brand is in the mind of your customer. And so we do branding. So we identify our values and our culture and all of those things, and we put out things to reinforce that. So all of our touch points, all of our marketing, maybe internal things like training and all of those things. But in the end, we don't really have control over it because it's all those little experiences. Like if you look at the analogy of like a jar full of, where you fill up the jar and you put the big rocks in first. So you're going to put all your big rocks in there, but like they're going to fill it up with sand and then with water. And that's what your brand is, right? It's going to be all of that stuff. And so I think that's where doing as much of that as you can, where you're looking at what was their intention and then what does the customer think. And you just kind of got to do as much as you can. And it's never a perfect thing, even if you're going through a rebrand, right? That's why I think I prefer rebrands and revitalizations to new brands because I think it's harder when you're starting a company. You have an idea of what it's going to be, but often, there's a lot of people looking at other organizations to say, oh, I want to be like that. I want to be like that. They don't quite know who they are yet. And once they start performing their business, they're going to get a ton of feedback they're going to
Mhm.
have to adapt to, and they have to figure out their differentiation. And it's not really a quick fix all the time. I mean, and
Yes.
we can still
Mhm.
start with people, but I think you have to set
There's
idea,
some, yes, there's some experimenting.
yes, that you're experimenting,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
prototyping, you're going to be
yeah,
iterating and adapting until you really figure out what your special thing is that you
yeah,
bring into the world to
yeah.
serve people. So anyway,
Thanks,
all
Sarah.
right.
I feel like you've done a great job of having people think about it's about the people's experiences and your empathy with them with that. and then making decisions along a path to guide that of where you want them to see the future that you're moving toward. And that all of those things together, like the rocks in a jar, all those things together make up the brand. That's helpful to a non-branding person. Those are helpful analogies.
Yeah. And if it's inspiring, that's what gets people, that's what gets people through successfully. Yeah. So you're inspiring people through that process. Thanks you all for coming. Does anyone have any last minute questions before we log off? Thanks for coming. If you have any thoughts or want to do a follow-up with me, just reach out to me and I'd love to talk to you about what you're doing.